Hi guys, it's Belle here, and as you will have seen from the title of this video, it is time for me to share with you my February reading wrap-up of 2026. If you're new here, hello and welcome. But last year I started doing monthly reading wrap-up videos because my other biggest love, other than crafting, is reading, and I just wanted to share that with some of you. And I know many of you really enjoy these videos and get recommendations from them, and I'm just so happy to be able to share my love of books with more people. So as always, I'm going to be doing some gentle crafting. Today is mainly going to be some fussy cutting. I may do something else as well, but it's mainly going to be some fussy cutting. I have 17 books to talk to you about, guys. For it to be the shortest month of the year and for me to read 17 books blows my own mind. Just going to say that. Although I think that's because several of them were novellas or short stories. So it was a lot easier to read those. If you put those all together, they would have made one book. So do get a drink, something to snack on, and maybe some crafting. I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to talk about the audiobooks, and those are books that I only exclusively listen to on audio and do not have a physical copy of. Then I'll talk about ebooks, exactly the same. I've only read them an ebook. I do not own the physical copy. Then I will be talking to you about the physical books. And this month, I'm going to split it into genres again. I quite like doing that. So let's get started. I only listened to one audiobook that was exclusively an audiobook last month in February. It was once again a novella, a short story. Well, a short book, and it was called Salka, and it is by Francesca Smith. It is a really short audiobook. It is only about 3 hours long, and depending what kind of speed you comfortably listen to on audio, it's shorter than that. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Disclaimer, as always, a star rating system is very subjective, and even for me it changes amongst genres for me, so a 3.5 is still a really good rating. This is a mythical retelling, so it is a lyrical myth retelling based on the Welsh myth of the fairy lady of the lake who marries a shepherd. And what I loved about this book, I highly recommend, even if you do not listen to audiobooks or have never listened to an audiobook, if you want to pick this up, I highly, highly recommend the audiobook. This piece was originally written as a, what's it called, a cantonia, as an opera piece, and it is deeply lyrical and beautiful, and has some bits of singing in it in the Welsh language. So the narrators of this are Welsh. Some of the words used are Welsh, and I just think that adds to the magical lyricalness of it, which, if you are not a native Welsh speaker, works better on audio. The other thing I loved about this, if you don't know, the basic kind of story, I'm not going to give spoilers, but the basic kind of myth is that a young human shepherd falls in love with a beautiful fairy woman who comes from under the lake. That is where her people reside, and his farm is struggling, and he falls in love with her, and they end up marrying. This is said very, very quickly, so I'm not giving any spoilers as to the rest of the story. And she brings with her the wealth of the fairies, but they are only allowed to marry because she cannot return to the lake at any time to visit her family. But should he strike her 3 times, he will lose her. She will return to the lake and he will never see her again. Now, in the original story, striking doesn't literally mean to hit. It's more like I think in one point of the original myth that he gets annoyed, so he taps her really hard, like on the shoulder, like shush, you know, like that. That's considered a strike, not actually, you know, the other kind. It's meant to sort of show how tricky the Fae are, because even something as normal as maybe kind of if a child was meant to wander off the road and you kind of grab them to pull them back, the Fae would consider that a strike, because it's basically if you ever put your hand or your action on them in a way that is not just out of kindness and love, that is considered a strike. What I loved about the retelling of this particular book is that it was heart blows. So in other words, if he was to ever speak to her in a way that upset her, that misjudged her, or that she thought was of a cruel tone, and I think that's even harder than the original, that would be considered one of the blows. And so we get this story where we have two people who are deeply in love, but from two different worlds. And it really underlines the idea of differences, be that in community or be that in culture. In this case, we have the other world, fairies and humans, who already live in an uneasy tension. You know, we're talking about a time when this myth was told where people were highly superstitious of the fairies and what they were doing. And we have these two cultures, and it's the differences between them and the pressure people feel to conform. And how even though he loves Salka, Owen is torn as time moves on because she is so different. And there are instances where he points out that difference to her because he is having it kind of emphasized around others, whereas in their home it might not be something he would be as stressed about. And so the other thing I love about this book is in fairy tales we often just get the points of view of either the main two characters or a couple of side characters. In this retelling we get the points of view of multiple characters. Some of the chapters are 30 seconds long. They're very, very short. So we don't just get Salka and Owen's point of view. We get the point of view of his mother, of his friends, of people in the village, of the girl who had hoped to marry him herself. And yeah, we hear all of them and see their reactions, which makes this feel more realistic. It makes it feel less like a fairy tale that we think of as being ancient now, and more like something that is realistic. So yeah, I highly recommend Salka by Francesca Smith. As I said, it's very, very short, both in book form and in audio. And I just love the fact that I love fairy tales and myth retellings. So this was a great way to revisit one that I knew. So ebooks. I read 5 ebooks, I believe, in February, but 4 of them I read exclusively on ebook, and as of yet do not have the physical copy of, although there is a couple that I actually will be on the lookout of the physical copy of. So firstly, let's do Cozy Mystery. So I read Criminally Coco by Amanda Flowers. This is a short novella in between the main full length novels in the series. This is book 3.5 in the Amish Candy Shop mystery. So it falls just after book 3 and just before book 4. And this is set at Easter in New York, whereas the rest of the stories that I've read so far, the rest of the novels, are set in the town of Harvest in, I want to say, Ohio. Now, I would have been I would have spoke about those books in other reviews, because this is a fairly new murder mystery, cozy murder mystery series to me. I gave this book 3.5, and there was only one reason for that. We have travelled to New York at Easter time, but instead of us seeing the mystery through the eyes of Bailey, who is the main female character in the series, that the series revolves around, we are actually seeing it through the eyes of Charlotte. No, I didn't give it 3.5. I gave it 3, sorry. Who is a young Amish girl who actually works in Bailey's grandparents' Amish sweet shop alongside Bailey. And she has travelled with Bailey. I don't want to say why, because I don't want to give spoilers, because something happens in book 3 that is what leads on to this situation in book 3.5. So I don't want to give spoilers. But Charlotte travels with Bailey to New York during Easter for, shall we say, an event. And Charlotte has never been outside of her Amish town before. We know from earlier books that she is struggling with the rules of being Amish and hasn't yet decided which way she's going to go. And I really enjoyed seeing the world through her eyes and having her narrate a book instead of Bailey, who has been for quite a while annoying me. And basically there are no murders in this book. What happens is there is something going on that Bailey is involved with and that Charlotte is there helping with, and someone is trying to sabotage that. There are several instances. Most people think they are accidents, but Charlotte is starting to think, no, this is actual sabotage. Someone's out to get Bailey or sabotage the situation. And we go from there as Charlotte tries to work out who's doing it, why they're doing it, and to make sure that Bailey is okay. Now, I have made a decision that I will not be continuing with this series for the moment. I have said in previous vlogs, in previous wrap-ups, that Bailey irritates me quite a lot. I don't understand why the female main characters in so many murder mystery books are so annoying. And in this one, even though we were in the head of Charlotte, and I actually quite like Charlotte, there was too much of Charlotte looking at Bailey going, oh, she's so perfect. Oh my gosh, look how perfect her hair is. Look how beautiful her eyes are. Look at how kind. Look at how intelligent. Look at how talented. Oh my goodness, I just admire her so much. She's amazing. Isn't she amazing? Blah, 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 blah. And I've kind of can't anymore. I want more interesting main female characters. I don't want them to be so perfect and talented. I want to see them struggle. I want to see them be more rounded. I want to see them be more complex. And actually, there will be a book I will be talking about later in this reading wrap-up where that is the case with a cozy mystery. And I think a lot of other cozy mystery writers might need to up their game, really, with their main female characters. I'm not that interested in Bailey. And because of that, as much as I love the Amish setting and the sweets and everything like that, the descriptions of, I don't think I want to continue with this series for the moment. I may return to it. I don't know. But right now, it's not what I want to continue with. So, yeah, that's where we are in that one. Now, let's move on to historical fiction. I read roughly on ebook, only on ebook, 3 historical fictions. One of them's more of a gothic historical fiction. Well, it's more gothic, but that I'll talk about right at the end. So let me talk about the first historical fiction. This is The Strange Adventures of H by Sarah Burton. I gave this 3.75, but I enjoyed it enough that I am thinking of getting the book. So this is set in the mid to late 1600s. We meet H and her siblings, and something happens early in the book. It's really difficult. They do something, her and her siblings, she is the youngest, where that leads to many unseen consequences, which result in her and one of her sisters being orphaned and sent to London to live with an aunt. Now, H at this point, by the way, we never know her name. She takes other names in the book, but she's always referred to as H, even by her family. When we first meet her, I want to say she's about 13, maybe. And her and her sister end up going to live with their aunt in London. They really enjoy it. And we kind of go from there. Now, I will tell you, there are trigger warnings, massive trigger warnings for this book. A lot of it does not necessarily happen on page, but please, if you need to know trigger warnings, check them out, because there are some very difficult discussions, ideas and themes in this book. And we follow H at a very difficult time in London. We see her experience the plague. It's returned again, which was about 1665. So we see that. That leads to drastically sad consequences for H. And we follow her as she has to make some very difficult life choices and ends up living a very different life than she ever expected, especially as I think her father was a reverend. So we are during the time of the 1665 plague. We also encounter the 1666 Great Fire of London, and we also get other historical things like the playhouses, the 1668 Shrove Tuesday riots by the Young Apprentices. There were often Shrove Tuesday riots. I do not know why apprentices decided that for Lent they were going to go and riot in streets and attack places. I don't know why that was a thing, but in 1668 in particular, it was particularly bad. And the kind of places they were attacking were the kind of places where H at that point was working. And so don't want to give spoilers. And what I will say about this book is that Burton gives amazing historical detail. I felt fully in the London of the 17th century. And I really, really enjoyed that. There's even mentions of things like the Nonsuch House, which was a house that's supposedly the first ever prefabricated house. It was brought from the Netherlands in about 1579 to the old, what was then the old London Bridge. Well, I say the old London Bridge, I mean as it was London Bridge, but London Bridge is a bit different now. It was flat packed, sent over and built on London Bridge. It was 4 stories high, and I think, I don't know how realistic it is, but it wasn't even held together with nails or things. I don't know how realistic that was. Anyway, it was built there. It was given to someone's mistress, I want to say, but the way that London Bridge was back then reminds me of the old bridges in Florence and that, where they were just filled with shops and houses. So it wasn't a bridge as we would know it today. It was completely built up, and you had to kind of walk very carefully between all these buildings. And H sees the Nonsuch House, this famous house around London, and gets up close to it. It only stood for a little while. I think it was taken down about the mid 1700s. So probably about 100 years or 50 years after H actually sees it in the book. But yeah, it's just part of London's weird history. So if you haven't heard about it before, I highly recommend going to look up the history of the Nonsuch House on London Bridge. So Burton manages to really build this atmosphere in mid 1600 London up to the end of sort of late 1600 London. So yeah, the 17th century. My issue with this book, the reason I kind of want it, but is because I enjoyed the story, even though it was very dark. But one of the things was, considering how dark it was and some of the themes we deal with and some of the things that happen, I had no emotional response to this book whatsoever. It was almost, not exactly, but it was almost like when I used to read history texts at university. I was just enjoying the facts, the story, the setting, the atmosphere, and the learning. But the characters didn't feel real to me. So I can't give it more than a 4 there, because I need to feel that way with the characters. And the reason it got knocked down from a 4 is right at the end. Now, there's a lot about the playhouses in this book and the theatre, which is also really interesting. But it felt like a Shakespearean farce, especially near the end of the book. The last few chapters, I mean, you have to suspend some disbelief anyway with this book. But you have to go beyond suspending disbelief at the end. It was just like, oh, come on. Too many coincidences, too many things happening, too many storylines that you're trying to tie up in a nice, neat little bow with things that you just think, really? And just the actions of the people, like, everyone put your hand up if you feel this way, and isn't H this way? And I honestly thought I was watching a Shakespearean play, which kind of is good, because it's, the feel of the whole book is a bit like that. And considering how important plays and things were at this time, I feel like maybe that's what she was going for. It also takes you a little while to get into this book. H is writing almost like it's her diary. And it can take you a little while to get into the way the language is with this book. I will say that. But after the first few chapters, I have to say I was hooked. I didn't want to put the book down. But it did just feel like a play. Anyway, let's move on from there. So that is The Strange Adventures of Haste by Sarah Burton. Then we come to Babylonia by Costanza Cosati. I gave this 4.5 stars. I need to find a copy of this book. Cosati wrote, before this, she wrote Clytemnestra, and I have that on my Kindle as well. And I need to get to that. I loved the writing. Interestingly, before I tell you what it was about, I started this book near the end of last year. But I just, even though I was enjoying the story and it was stuck vividly in my mind, I just wasn't in the mood for this kind of story. So what I love about this book, it is a fictional account, but based on a real person. So the book itself is set during the ancient Assyrian Empire, so the ancient Mesopotamians. That empire lasted from about, this is not my speciality, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I have studied or looked at, it lasted from about the 14th century BC to about maybe the 7th century BC. Anyway, it was an ancient empire that spanned a great area. And we are in that time period, which I love because you don't get many historical books set in that time period. And we need more. And we are following a young orphaned girl. Now I'm going to try and pronounce this again. Forgive me if I get it wrong. But Semiramis, who is abandoned, is orphaned and taken in by, I think he's a shepherd or someone like that, in a small town in Ebonari. And we follow her. She is already considered cursed because of the situation of her being orphaned. There are rumours that her mother might have been a goddess. The man who's taken her in is not a nice guy. Trigger warnings throughout for this book, guys. And again, some very unsettling themes written into this book. And she has a very difficult life. She's not like a lot of the other girls in the town. People make fun of her. They don't quite trust her. She's weird. She's all these things. She is this very feisty young woman, which, you know, she doesn't want to play by society's rules. She wants to run and climb with the boys and do all these things. And yeah, there's a lot of things in her early life which are not great. And this all culminates because there is a war going on between two warring brothers. And this all culminates when something awful happens and to her. and a new governor comes to Ebenari, and she decides that this is her way out. And so she manages to get this governor, Onus, to take her back to what is at that point in this history, I think it's called Kalu, which was the ancient city at the time. So he falls for her and decides he will marry her. This all happens quite early on in the book. I don't know how real that is to history, but I do know that the original Semiramis was supposedly a young orphaned girl who wasn't born in Kalu and did end up traveling there. So in the story, she meets Onus, she travels there to Kalu and becomes his wife, and he has a very close relationship with the king at the time. I believe his name was Ninus, yeah, but that's not his. The Assyrian kings would have a birth name but then take a different name when they became king, but I'm going to call him by his kind of birth name. So yeah, he's very good friends with Ninus. They have a very close relationship, and we go from there as we see these three very different people who have had very different traumas, but whose traumas kind of bond them. We see how their stories unfold. I will say, like I said, there is some unsettling themes in this book, and it is gory. We actually see war and the things that happen in it, like Costanza does not shy away from that, so that's not your thing. Also, there is a scene in here with lions that I found particularly upsetting, so yeah, be aware of that. But anyway, so we follow their stories until the point that we know historically is going to happen, because it's based on a real person. So in reality, Semiramis, who became known as Shamaramat, I believe, I may be, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. She actually did become queen, this young girl, Semiramis, and she reigned roughly, from what my study has shown, about 1811 to 1806 BC. She was regent for her young son. Now, what is so interesting is there is no other record, as far as I can see, of other Assyrian queens. And not only was she a queen in a man's world, but she made enough of a kind of impact that she was still, not only has history not forgotten her, but Greek scholars became slightly obsessed with her, certain ones, and would write about her. That also means that as a powerful, independent, strong woman, unfortunately, male gaze history has sometimes turned her into something that may not be as flattering. But she did become a queen. She not only built cities and had a great impact on the empire under her queenship, she also led military campaigns, and we actually see that in the book before she becomes queen. That is actually, she takes part in a battle that actually did happen, and it's very gruesome, guys. This book also has multiple points of view, including not only her and Onus and Ninus and others, but also a young slave boy, Ribble, I want to say his name is. He belongs to Onus's house. But when Semiramis comes, they develop a friendship. And so we have all these different kind of stories going on, all these historical points, characters who are real historical characters, political intrigue. It is a really interesting book. I love this kind of book. I love learning about a history and a people that I don't know a lot about. And as much as the gore kind of turned my stomach a little bit, and it's not, no. It also deals with the idea of PTSD and how that might have looked during ancient times, when if you were a man, and especially a king, you were supposed to be strong and bloodthirsty. And I found that really interesting take. So I am definitely going to pick up Clytemnestra at some point this year, sooner rather than later, because I loved the writing and I now need a copy of this. The hardback is absolutely beautiful. And I also want to learn more about the orphan girl who became a queen of the Assyrian Empire. So the final book that I only read on audio ebook is a book I read before, but I'm talking years and years ago, to the point that I couldn't really remember the story. And I'm reading it for a reason, but I won't give spoilers why that is. You will find out soon. But I read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This was written in about 1892. It's considered a short Gothic story. The one I read had just under 30 pages, so very short. I gave it a 3.75. It is good. Again, this is one of those that the story's good, but what I'm fascinated by is what the story is based on, why she wrote the story. This might have been written in 1892, but it is still very, very, valid in today's society. So we have this young married couple. They have a new baby. Since the baby's birth, the wife has not been feeling herself. We would know that now as postpartum depression and things like that. Her husband is a doctor, and we are in a time when not only men, but particularly male doctors, thought they knew everything, and women in particular just had to listen to whatever they said. And to help her with her illness, it is an illness more, you know, not just of the body, but everything. They go away to this little house, not little, but a house, where he thinks the rest and quiet will help her. And they pick a room, and she becomes obsessed in this room with the yellow wallpaper, which seems to not only be moving, but have things trapped inside it that are trying to get out and get her. And we watch as the atmosphere becomes more and more tense and overwhelming and stifling. And it is beautifully written. I should really knock it up to a 4. I may do. It is beautifully written. It's very short, so I highly recommend you read it. And yeah, we watch as she is struggling with that. And no one's really listening. She can't tell people what's going on or anything like that. And she becomes obsessed with this wallpaper. It is so creepy in that way. Now, what I find most fascinating about this is that Perkins Gilman wrote this in response to what was known as the rest cure at this time in history, where when a woman, especially after having a baby and wasn't feeling great, instead of them actually doing anything that might actually help her, what they told women to do was to literally rest. Don't think, don't read, don't write, maybe do a bit of embroidery, go for a tiny little walk, don't even really talk to people, basically lie in your bed all day. And we watch what happens to a woman's inactive mind when she is not being listened to. And this is such an important book for that. So yeah, I may put it up to a 4 because of the things that it's dealing with. It's also quite creepy and gothic. So highly recommend that if you haven't read it. It's, like I said, under 30 pages long. It won't take you long at all. So that is all of those, and I've done some fussy cutting, which is great because now I can get these in here. These are some digitals from the Crafty by Tony I Love Walks vintage Valentine kit that I was working on, and I'm just going to add all the labels and the tabs to my label and tab box to work with at a future time. I got some fussy cutting done. So now let me grab the physical books. So again, I'm going to be doing these in kind of genre order. And I'm going to try and be as quick as possible. But there's 17 books to talk about, guys. And I want to give you proper kind of reviews of them. So we'll see. Anyway, first genre, and the only one in this genre I read, I have been picking one book a month as a dedicated reread. So I have my little piles that I wanted to work through, because I love rereading and I want to reread more, especially books that I love. I want to check in that there's still books that I love and see if they still deserve to take up space on my bookshelf, considering how many new books are coming in that I love. And so I picked up Bolu Babalola's Love in Colour. It was Valentine's, so I decided this was the perfect reread. This is beautiful. I've read this. I think this is the third time I've read this, maybe, possibly. And I love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. This is a book of short stories written by Bolu Babaloa. She is also known for contemporary romance writing. She has a book. Her first book was full-length novel, I think, was Honey and Spice. I tried it. It wasn't for me. And I'll explain why. Because I love her writing style. So we have these short stories. And what I love is she gives you right at the back of the book each of the short stories and the myth and country they are from. So I'm going to hold that there in case you want to pause the video and just check these out. And what she does is, with many of these short stories, she has retold them, these myths, these fairy tales, these whatever they are, myths, legends, stories. And she has rewritten them with the women being front and centre. And in some cases, she's moved them completely into the modern era. Psyche and Eros is actually in a sort of New York skyscraper, kind of almost like Vogue magazine thing. They all have cars and mobile phones and the computers, and she has quite a few like that where she's modernized them. And then she has some that are set more in the time period, but retold, especially with a different ending. Which one was it? I think it's Atem. I think it's this one, where thank goodness she rewrote it, because I actually looked up the original myth afterwards and read that, and I was just like, no, that's not a good ending. So I love what she did with the ending. Again, I'm not going to give spoilers. I highly recommend you go look up not only this book, but the myths and stories that I was reading them side by side. So I'd read one, then I'd go look up the myth that it was based on. And I was reading one a day. And then Nefertiti is kind of set in a dystopian world, which I love the Nefertiti story. The thing is, the majority of these rewritings I really enjoyed. There were a couple, like the Psyche and Eros one, I wasn't too bothered about really. And the Yar one, I wasn't really like that invested. It was good. She writes beautifully, but those two I wasn't that bothered about. But in the end of the book, she actually does 3 new, as she calls them, stories, myths, fairy tales. So we have, I think it's Talia or Tiara, Oren, and I don't want to pronounce it wrong because it is a Nigerian name, but I think it's Aligomeji. Now, the first 2 of those, Tiara and Oren, are set in modern times, and they weren't for me. And I'll say why in a minute. But the last one, oh my goodness, was beautiful. It was beautifully written. And it's basically the retelling of Babalola's parents' love story. She retells it in the way like, there was a princess who lived on this street and there was a prince. They weren't princesses and prince, but it's the way she tells the story as if you're reading a proper fairy tale. And it is beautiful. And it talks about this princess and prince and their love story and what it's based on and the family they create and what true love really is. And it is beautifully written. So yeah, 4.5 stars. I also love the amount of diversity in here. I love myths and retellings and fairy tales. They're some of my favorite things to read. But most of them I read, obviously a lot of Celtic ones, and there are a lot of European ones. But I really want, there are so many others around the world, from indigenous populations who have had these stories for thousands upon thousands of years. And they are just as beautiful and just as interesting and just as important with their themes and messages. And we just don't read enough of them. So I really recommend, really, if you love myths and retellings, I really wish you would pick this book up, because we just need to be reading more worldwide and not being so narrow in the scope of stories that we read. Saying that, I'm mainly reading Celtic retellings in March, but it is the Irish Readathon. So what I have discovered is I love it when Babalola takes an ancient story or puts a story in a more ancient mythological kind of style. I do not like her modern contemporary work. I don't think, as much as her writing's brilliant, I don't think it's as lyrical or beautiful in her contemporary work. Amazing writer, super talented. Let me please underscore that. And if you like contemporary romance, especially if it's steamy, check out her books. But that's just not for me. I'm not a romance reader. I don't like contemporary romance in particular. And I love lyrical, magical writing and prose. And I got that for the majority of this book, but not for all this book. So that is why it gets a 4.5 stars. But believe me when I say it is going to remain on my bookcase and going to be something I pick up repeatedly. So let's get into the murder mystery / cozy mystery sort of genre. First book I'm going to start with is The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This again is a reread because I'm rereading all the Thursday Murder Club books. This is book 2 in the series. Before I get on to the final book that just came out last year. Now, I can't tell you much about this because I don't want to give spoilers, but The Man Who Dies Twice, we are once again back with my 4 favourite people. So we are back with Elizabeth, Ibrahim, Joyce and Ron. I'll read the synopsis. Elizabeth has received a letter from an old colleague, a man with whom she has a long history. He needs her help. His story involves stolen diamonds, a violent mobster and a very real threat to his life. As bodies start piling up, Elizabeth enlists Joyce, Ibrahim and Ron in the hunt for a ruthless murderer. And if they find the diamonds too, well, wouldn't that be a bonus? But this time they're up against an enemy who wouldn't bat an eyelid at knocking off the 4 septuagenarians. Can the Thursday Murder Club find the killer before the killer finds them? I just love the foxes on here. I really do. I have some of the special edition ones that you'll see as I'm doing my rereading that actually have the sprayed edges. If I could get all the sprayed edges, I'd be very happy. So as it says in this one, Elizabeth gets a phone call from someone who, for many reasons that become evident in the book as we read, she should not be getting a phone call from, and he needs her help. And there are stolen diamonds, and as it said, there are mobsters, and in this book Elizabeth is in danger, and or she could be in danger, and we go from there as the 4 of them are trying to solve what happens. Now, I say 4. There is something that happens to one of the 4, and again, I'm not going to give spoilers, but something happens very on in the book that when I first read it, I sobbed. I really sobbed. This time I was prepared for it. I didn't cry this time, not that part, but I did get very emotional. And it just kind of hurts my heart because I love these 4. And for anything to happen to any of them would be sad. But for anything to happen to this one particular character, if you've read it, you know who I'm talking about. This one particular character, he's just the sweetest. Anyway, we are following them. And because of that, several members are not as involved in this mystery as they would normally be. It's a good book. I will say, okay, I gave this 5 stars. What I will say is that, like many of these books, there are far too many subplots. There is too much going on. And I know for some of you that is an issue that you have with these books, and one of the reasons you don't enjoy them. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters that get introduced at all different times. Amongst our main group of characters that's growing, because we don't just have the 4, we have these outer characters that are also now main characters in their own right. And so we have this big enough group as it is, And then it continues to grow with the books. And I understand that. I agree with that. There are themes like mobsters and diamonds that aren't really my thing. If I read those things on another type of book, I wouldn't pick them up. They're not themes I enjoy reading about. They're not stories I enjoy. But for some reason, none of that matters to me. I love these 4. And because of what happens to one of them, this had to have a 5-star because it makes me cry. It makes me emotional all the way through the book. So it is a bit complex. There's things going on. I can't remember if the first time round whether I guessed who the big bad was. But there's lots of twists and turns. And as always, Joyce is just a joy in this whole book because there's one, they have to travel somewhere, again, not giving spoilers, but she gets handed or offered a glass of milk and Joyce is like, oh, whoever does that anymore? I can't remember the last time I had milk. I'm going to drink it anyway because I may never get it again. And then someone kisses her and she's like, oh, I might be in there. And then he kisses someone else and she's like, oh no, it must just be cultural. I love Joyce. She's so funny. So this got 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. Did I enjoy it more than the first book? Do you know what? I think I did because the amount of subplots in the first book, even though there was subplots in this and lots going on, I feel like there was less necessarily going on than in the first book. I can feel him honing his writing a little bit. And yeah, the thing that happens at the beginning with one of them just makes this a 5-star for me. So that is book 2 in that. Let's get on to my Poirot reread for this month. I read Dumb Witness. Considering Cards on the Table last month is one of my favourite Poirots, this is not one of my favourites. It's not one of my least favourite, but this is Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie. It's book, I want to say 16 or 17 in the Poirot series. I gave this book 3.5 stars. And having not read this for a little while, I didn't realise that a book that I read last year, not going to say what it is because it'll give spoilers, but a cozy mystery that I read last year is basically, the plot of it is very much highly based on this book, which I should have picked up on. So it tells you how long it's been since I read this one. So in Dumb Witness, we have an elderly spinster lady, Emily Arundel. She has a house. Her family, extended family, are visiting. And Emily has an accident, or what looks like an accident. And she starts to realise that it might not have been an accident. And she decides to write to Poirot to say, I think someone's trying to murder me. However, Poirot doesn't receive this letter for about 2 months. And when he does receive it, he goes to her house and finds out that Emily Arundel is dead. She has recently died. And he's trying to work out, well, not too recently, but, you know, he's trying to work out how the letter took that long to get to him and to work out if she was right. And everyone's like, no, it was just an accident. She's an elderly lady. She didn't recover. There's nothing suspicious here. No one believes there's anything suspicious, not even the doctor. But her last words and another incident that I don't want to say make Poirot very, very suspicious. And the dumb witness in this, the witness who can't speak, is Emily's dog, little dog, Bob, who Hastings adores because Hastings loves dogs. And we watch as Poirot begins to investigate what has happened to Emily and to investigate her family members and track down what actually happened and who the actual killer is. It's very interesting, as in all of these books, I say it repeatedly, everyone's a suspect because everyone has a reason to do things. I love the idea of the dog being the dumb witness, that is the linchpin in what helps Poirot not only solve the case, but work out that it was murder in the first place. I love that idea. And yeah, full of twists and turns, good read. It's just not one that sticks in my mind the way that Cards on the Table do. So that's why it gets 3.5. But as always, I will always recommend Agatha Christie and any Poirot. Now, this next book, and once again, forgive my pronunciation, this is Death and Dinuguan. Dinuguan. I'm going to pronounce it that way, which is a Filipino dish. This is book 6. in the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mysteries by Mia P. Mansala. I have read all of these. This is one of my favourite cozy mystery series that I've ever read. And this is the final book in the series. And I'm both sad and glad about this. That I gave this book 3.5 stars. This series started off super strong with its mysteries and things. But the last book and this book have not been as strong. And so whilst I'm sad this mystery series is ending, I have heard that Manansala is bringing out a YA Cozy Murder Mystery series that also revolves around tarot, possibly. And I may pick that up, as much as I don't normally read YA. So there's not much I can tell you about the series as a whole. Well, I can. Let's retract. This Leela is a brilliant, I really enjoy her, female character. This is the kind of characters I want in my murder mysteries. When we first meet Leela in book 1, something has happened, as in all cozy mysteries, which means she has to return to her hometown, as normally happens. And her grandmother and aunt, because Leela's parents are deceased, they have a Filipino restaurant in this small town called Shady Pines. And it is struggling. And Leela has restaurant experience. She is a baker more than anything. And so she returns to this town because something has happened in her life. She was in the big city, I think it was Chicago. And she returns to help with the restaurant and recover from what has happened. In these books, Leela is not just one kind of character. She is a very complicated person. She's complex, like we all are. She is not trying to be different, but is in her own way. We deal with cultural discussions about her being a Filipino in America, but never having travelled to the country of her parents' birth or her grandparents' birth. There is lots of talk about the cultural expectations on her and how she deals with those. And there is also, in the first book, she finds a dead body. These are murder mysteries. And also is in danger herself. And then in later books, we are actually dealing with the fact that because of that, she has kind of like a PTSD and has severe anxiety and experiencing panic attacks. And that is dealt with. It's even brought up a little bit in this book. She's not at the point anymore where she's having panic attacks, but it's brought up that she has memories of that. And because of that, she has done different types of training, and also she kind of has been taught to look for objects around her that could be used to help defend her when necessary. There's also a lot of representation in these books, really well done representation, not just in there because, but well done, both cultural and all sorts of other kinds of representation. And I love that about these books. These feel like actual life. And so I love her. I just love Leela. I love her family. I love the other friends that she has, the representation, how everyone is complex. There's even in one of the books, she starts behaving in a way that really upsets some people closest to her. And she has to recognize that. She has to recognize that's a fault. No one's kind of going, oh yeah, we're just letting you off the hook because you're a main character, as a main female character in a cozy mystery. No, they pull her up on it and they make her realize that they're upset with her. And even in this book, she's still trying to make sure that she's checking in with them and making sure that she's not allowing that behavior to happen, because she's not a bad person, but sometimes she just goes off and thinks, oh, I'm going to do this, and doesn't think about other people in that way when it comes to the mysteries. And I love that these things are constantly touched on. I also love about Mia P. Mansala's books that she always gives you trigger warnings and is always telling you, take care of your own mental health. These are what happens. She tells you if it's on page or off page and these kind of things. So I love these books. One more like this, please. Cozy mystery writers, stop just focusing on very white people in very white towns with perfect women and no real representation. I just want more rounded main characters, just because it's a cozy mystery that has a particular formula, that are easy to read, that, you know, we all know are not giant works of literary amazement, doesn't mean they can't be amazing books with great characters, great representation, and, you know, enjoyable. So as someone who loves cozy mysteries, I'm really, really craving that in my books now. And in this book in particular, I gave it a low rating because, and I read reviews afterwards, people were saying that it feels more like a Chamber of Commerce book. We are dealing with the fact that lots of women-owned businesses in Shady Pines have been burglarized. And one in particular is a newly opened chocolate shop that is run by two friends, one of whom is the cousin of Leela's romantic, her boyfriend. I don't want to say who that is because in the earlier books she has a couple, and I will say the romance is a very little subplot. There's not lots and lots of it in here, which I also love because cozy mysteries seem to be romances in disguise half the time. I don't want a big romance plot in my cozy mysteries. I want a cozy mystery, so I love the way that's handled. And one of them's murdered and one of them's ends up in hospital, and so they decide to try and work out who's doing the burglaries and who has done this to the people in the chocolate shop. And we go from there. However, there is a lot of talk about female-owned businesses, which, you know, we should be encouraging. They go to Chamber of Commerce meetings several times. They're getting, because by this time Leela and a couple of her friends have their own business, and they are working on contracts and working with other people. And there's lots of that kind of talk, like contract work and, you know, we can support you and where do you get your suppliers and what supplier do you have for this? And yeah, I can see why a lot of people didn't enjoy that. I also feel like the mystery was a bit blah, in all honesty. Obviously I was invested because it's a family member, but in the book, but also I also feel like there's part of it that was really far-fetched and again was a trope that I don't enjoy reading about. It's just not an interest of mine. So that was a bit, you know, and I kind of worked it all out. It wasn't that difficult considering there's only a few people really introduced that are new. And yeah, so I am sad that this series is finished because I want more books like this. I will be picking up her young adult book to see if that is as good, but I don't tend to enjoy a lot of young adult. But I just want more murder mysteries like this. So I am sad to see the end of Leela. Her and her family will live in my heart for a very long time. Also, oh my gosh, the food descriptions in that book. I am hungry the whole time I'm eating it. Between what she is baking, the hot chocolates, the ube biscuits, the Filipino foods. Oh my gosh, every title in the book is something and the second part is always a Filipino dish. So, oh my gosh, and there's always recipes in the back. So I highly recommend that series. Even if it didn't end on its best, it's still better than the majority of murder mystery series out there, cozy ones. Then I picked this up. Now this is Uketsu. This is Strange Houses. This author has gone viral. People are obsessed with this author's works. The first book I saw was Strange Pictures. I have not picked that up. Then I saw this one, and then there's Strange Buildings, and another one might be coming out. And they've kind of been republished or translated because I think they were written in the early 2020s, 2021, 2022 maybe. But they've been republished, translated now. And this author, no one knows who this author is. This is a pen name and doesn't even have a picture of him in the back. It's all a bit weird. But basically, this is a Japanese thriller. And we are following an author who, call me stupid, but until the last chapter of this book, I didn't realise the author persona. By what I mean about that is you will see, I'm trying to be careful, you will see that there is bits where it says author, like written like that. The author is meant to be this author. These are meant to be based on real things. Anyway, I didn't realise that till the last chapter. Anyway, in this one, let me read the blurb. A sinister hidden room, a dead space between two walls, a sealed cellar, a child's face glimpsed at a window. Every house hides secrets, but some secrets are far darker than others. And what I love about all of his books, I've only read this one, but it's why I'm interested in his work, is he will give you pictures or room maps or plans of buildings, and these happen throughout. Try not to give spoilers on page, the books, and you are meant to look at them, work out what might be wrong with them, and then as the book progresses, it shows you what you should be looking for. Now, I gave this a 3.75. I couldn't put this down. I read this in one sitting. It's a short book anyway. Look how short it is. I was hooked. However, what I will say is, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I understand it says a chilling Japanese mystery sensation, or The Chilling. I was expecting it to maybe be a bit more gory than it is. There's no gore. There's no murder on page, I think. And the other thing is there's too many amazing coincidences. So the author goes to his friend, who's an architect, and gives him the plan of this house that another friend had looked into buying, but there's something weird about it. And that architect immediately looks at the plans and goes, have you noticed this, 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 and this? This is what I think's gone on in this house. And you're like, look, I worked out what was wrong with the layout, but there's no way I would have jumped to that conclusion. And that conclusion just happens to be right. And it's a bit like, okay, this is a bit like, let me suspend my disbelief that you seem to be psychic and know what has happened. And then we go from there with the basic premise, and the story expands. It still kept me hooked, guys. I still enjoyed it, even though I'm saying that. And with the expansion, the thing that I didn't enjoy at the end, there were a couple of twists. Brilliant, great, liked those. I will say again, trigger warnings for this book. There is a couple of themes in here that are quite dark. So do not read them if that's your thing. I don't want to tell you them because I don't want to give spoilers, because it's quite a big part of the book. But if you are interested in picking this up but are wary about certain themes, maybe read the trigger warnings. I'm going to be honest, guys, I read the trigger warnings for every book I'm about to go into. So I always know people are like, don't put trigger warnings, it's spoilers. I don't care about spoilers. I really don't. I like knowing how a movie ends and everything about it before I watch it. And I don't want to know everything about a book, but I do want to know trigger warnings, because there are books I will not pick up depending on them. But even with the trigger warnings I read, I thought I'll go into this, I'll dip my toe in and see what I think. And then it was hooked and couldn't put the book down. Now, I don't mind twists. There are layers to this story. Love it. Bit like an onion, as they say in Shrek. But they then added one final layer that I was just like, right, that's one layer too far. Like, it's too much. My brain is doing a thing now where it's like, no, I didn't need that added extra. And I understand why it was, because it really does add an even maybe creepier element to the book, but I didn't need it with all the other layers. So I was particularly interested in reading it because Janice Hallett said of his book Strange Pictures, so captivating I read it in a day. Me too, Janice. So disturbing I thought about it all night. I wouldn't quite agree with that, but I haven't picked up Strange Pictures. But I love Janice Hallett's work, and this gave me those vibes. There's some chapters, or it's set in areas, but you kind of read it quite quickly because of the way it's written. I said after finishing this, because my son wants to read it, I was like, it was really good, captivated me, really good. I don't know if I'm going to remember it in a year's time. I might do, because it's the first book of its kind that I've read. And I was like, but I probably won't keep it on my bookshelf. And then literally the next day I went into a bookshop and I saw his book, Strange Buildings, and I almost bought it. So I don't know what that says. I enjoyed the reading experience. I think that's why I want to pick it up. But yeah, so just in case you're interested in some Japanese mystery, now we're going to get onto some more historical fiction. There's actually only one of them. And this is The Secret Diaries of Charles Ignatius Sancho. It is written by Joseph Paterson. Some of you might know that name, but he's an actor. I'm going to hold this up. You can read what it says. He's a very well-known British actor, and this is his first book. He's been, as he puts it, obsessed with Charles Ignatius Sancho for more than 20 years. And this is his kind of fictionalized account, because Charles Ignatius Sancho is a very famous black man in British history, And yet there's really not a lot about him, which is interesting. And at the end of this book, or at the start of it, Joseph even asks if anyone has any more information to contact him, because he is fascinated by this. And just look at the inside of this. This is Charles, and this is his wife, Anne Osborne. So let me tell you about the fictional account, and then we'll dip into where it lines up with real history. So this is set in Georgian London between 1729 and 1780, which was the lifespan of Charles Ignatius Sancho. This is written in the form of diary entries, reflections. There are his the character. He's got his actual diaries that he'd kept, and then he's putting extra accounts in between them. And the reason he's doing this is because he's getting near the end of his life, and he's writing this for his son, William, Billy. He's writing it for Billy, hoping to let Billy know about him as a father and his life, to kind of educate Billy. And there's bits that he touches on in the book. This is fictional, but there's bits that he touches on where he says maybe a father shouldn't put these burdens on his son because he's dealing with some difficult issues. And it just read so quickly. I love it. And I love the writing style. I want to kind of show you a little bit. So it'll say 46 years old. Chapter 1, in which Charles Ignatius Sancho relates his early life. And then it'll have another one. Chapter 3, where we meet Sancho, the entertainer. I just love that. It read so quickly. I love this book. Plus, look at that cover, guys. The cover is stunning. Absolutely stunning. I picked this book up a couple of years ago. It's been sitting that long on my bookshelf. Shame on me. Because I had read a middle grade series that I can't remember the name of right now. But it was basically a middle grade murder mystery or mystery series where the two young girls in it, one of them was Charles Ignatius Sancho's daughter. And the other one was the young black niece of a white lord, British lord, and that was a real thing. And actually we see that lord in this book, because that lord actually sat in on some very interesting, because I think he was a judge or something. He sat in on some very interesting cases around the idea of runaway slavery as slaves on British soil. So we follow Charles in this book, and where it sort of lines up with the real Charles Ignatius Sancho, because that was that person, he was born on a slave ship and was orphaned. Now in this, he's orphaned as soon as he's kind of born, but in real life, apparently he might have been about 2. He is then taken to the plantation of the slave owner, who for some reason keeps him more in the house. And then when he's about 3, 4, something like that, the slave owner takes him to Britain. We never really know the name of the slave owner in this book. He knows him as Mr. Henry, but we don't know if that's his name. And Charles says that. And he's taken to England to stay with the 3 sisters of the slave owner. And so Charles Ignatius Sancho, both the real person and the one in this book, has a very different life to the average person of colour at this time, especially those who are enslaved. And Paterson touches on this in his introduction, because he says, you know, obviously the history of enslavement is one full of trauma and brutality, and a lot of books about it write about that. And there is the idea of trauma for entertainment. The concept of that, are we just reading about things, not necessarily because we want to be entertained, but it's that whole thing. And he says, don't pick this book up if that's what you think this is, because Charles Ignatius had a slightly different life. Not to say he didn't have troubles, and not to say he wasn't treated badly because he was a man of colour. However, in the house of, he calls them the 3 witches, in the house of these 3 women, he's treated more as a pet. He has a nice bed, he's clothed well, he's not exactly a servant, but he's not exactly not a servant, so he's not liked by the servants, but he's not really given any education or anything like that. He talks about how from a young age he has plenty food, to the point that he's a little bit tubby and carries on that weight through the rest of his life. He particularly likes the scone. And so there's that situation. But these three women, he's their pet. He's still enslaved, just a different type of enslavement. But he has no real interaction except for one black servant in the house. He has no real interaction with anyone of his culture or colour. And there is an incident when he's a little bit younger where in real life it's said that he taught himself to read and write. In the book, it's more that he has a run-in with a famous slave catcher who finds Charles. He hasn't run away or anything, but this slave catcher just thinks any man of colour must be a runaway slave. And the Duke of Montague intercedes. They're out somewhere, I can't remember where. And takes Charles back to his house and realises that he's a very intelligent boy. And we go from there with the Duke of Montague kind of taking Charles and the Duke's family under their wing and educating him in music, writing, theatre, all these kind of things. But obviously they don't tell the three witches, the ladies he lives with. And when they do find out, they're very, very angry. And we watch as their behaviour towards him changes and his life changes. And he ends up running away. And we follow as Charles Ignatius Sancho kind of has his ups, his very, very downs, and his ups and some downs and his ups. We follow his life, and the fictional account is fascinating, but the man himself is fascinating. He has very hard times. There are themes in this book, again, that might be uncomfortable. Not as many maybe as some of the other books, but there is a time when his intended has to go to a plantation to look after one of her relatives. She is a free woman in Britain. She I think she was born in England, but her parents are of different African descents. She's educated, but she's sent there as a free woman on a plantation surrounded by enslaved people. And I will say that part of the book is harrowing to read. There's a particularly very disturbing and upsetting scene. But, you know, the rest of the book is fascinating as well for other reasons. But just be aware there are some things in this. And yet I still highly recommend any of you look up Charles Ignatius Sancho or read this book. Now, the man himself, and it is touched on in here, he is famous for many reasons. Bearing in mind, this is 1729 to 1780. As Joseph Paterson says, this is not a political piece. He's not trying to prove a point. But we need to just realise there were people of colour and ethnicities, free people of colour and ethnicity in Britain for many, 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 many hundreds of years, going back, Tudor times and things like that. And this is one story of one of these men. The real Charles Ignatius Sancho was a composer, a writer. He was an abolitionist, and he was also a shopkeeper. Now, this was a big thing back then because, first of all, he's a person of colour. And secondly, it costs money to build a shop and get trade. And the real Charles Ignatius, was befriended by the Montague family. He also worked for them for a time. And they also helped him be able to buy his shop. And they were friends. He was friends with many people. In this book, he meets King George. His music is composed. He was a man of letters. His letters have since been found. You can go to, I think it's the British Museum, I'm not quite sure, where you can actually see some of his letters that he wrote. He educated people on the black slavery situation as an abolitionist. And more than that, I mean, that is all massively important. He is supposedly, as far as we can tell, the first black man to vote in an election in Britain. Because at that time, if you owned a business and property, I believe, you could vote. And he did. It wasn't made easy for him, and we see that in the book. But he is, as far as we know, historically, documents have shown, the first black male to vote in Britain. And this is in the 1760s, 1770s. Also, he is, as far as we know, the first or one of the first black people to have their obituary in a British newspaper. Now, the main people who had their obituaries in newspapers were the wealthy, the rich, the important. So for him, as a black man, to have his obituary in a British newspaper is a massive thing. And as is touched on in this book and in real life, he did not experience the life of many people of his colour. He did not experience the hardships of the plantation, even though he was born on a slave ship. He did not experience a lot of the other things that people of his colour did at this time. But he still did experience racism, fear, abuse, things like that. But he even touches on in here that many of his friends, until much later, were white. He didn't know anyone of colour because he was always in white society with white people. And he only met a few, some big names of black people who were fighting and writing for abolition at this time. He composed music that could be listened to. Like this man did so much, and yet he is often forgotten or overlooked, and that should not be allowed. And I love the way that Joseph Paterson has written him. He's very likable. I also like, I don't know how real this was, but I also like how when Charles is on a downward spiral, he shares a rented building with an Irish worker, and there's a lot of interaction between the black community and the Irish community in this book at this time. They're going to the same kind of bars, they're hanging out together, all this kind of thing. They've got friendships, they look after each other, because as much as everyone wants to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, there has been a long period of the Irish being disliked, hated, prejudiced against in British history, right up until even the 1950s. And so there's often, sadly, a bit of a battle as to who is disliked most sometimes. And I love how Joseph tied those two things together. I don't know how real that was with the real Charles Ignatius. I could talk about this forever. I'm not going to. I need to move on because I've been talking a long time. But I highly recommend picking this book up, or at least finding out more about Charles Ignatius Sancho. Yeah, and I gave that book 4 stars. Now we're getting on to fantasy, the genre fantasy. I'm going to start with Beyond the Deep Woods, which is the first in the Edge Chronicles by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell. This is a middle grade book. I will show you a little bit of the artwork. Beautiful. I love Riddell's artwork anyway. Now I gave this 3.5. It is the first. I have all 3. I picked them up secondhand. So I have been really craving a bit of Pratchett since I finished the Discworld, and this I thought might give me those vibes. I will say though, don't just give this to young children. Maybe read it first. This is what I would consider, if you've ever read Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events, this gives that vibes. We are following young Twig, who lives with the wood trolls. He's always felt different, but he doesn't know why. And then one day, Mother Wood Troll tells him something, and says he has to go and stay with a relative of theirs. And Twig is so upset about what he's heard that he decides to do what no wood troll has ever done, and he leaves the path. He lives in the deep woods. We are in a world... But there is a map. Where is the map? We are in a strange world, the Edge, which gives me, again, Pratchett Discworld vibes. Here are the deep woods. There's the Twilight Woods, the Enlands, the Maya. We're in this strange world where basically everything is either out to kill you or rob you or something. And so we follow Twig as he leaves the path, which wood trolls don't do, and encounters all these different situations, most of which are dangerous, or very bad things are happening to him. And these are some of the people he meets. This one in particular, no, it literally says on here, so begins a heart-stopping adventure that will take Twig through a nightmare world of goblins, trogs, bloodthirsty beast and flesh-eating trees. There is actually a flesh-eating tree in this book, and yet that creature there still freaks me out more. Nothing good happens in this book. There are a few moments where you just think, oh, Twig, that's so good, and oh, I hope this lasts, and you know it's not going to last. Nothing good happens in this book. Every moment he's encountering either someone to kill him or encountering someone who doesn't want to kill him, but then something else wants to kill them. I don't know. It's a whole thing. I quite enjoyed it. I will be continuing with the series. It's a bit depressing, but I will be continuing with the series. It was a fun and quick read, but well, not fun. It was a quick read. It was enjoyable for what it was. It was in the 1990s, I want to say. 1998. But I think it was before that. Was this republished? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I'm just going to say that. So if you're going to give it to a middle grade child, read it first. Then we get on to 9 Goblins. I'm just going to say this right now. It's one of my favourite books of the month. I gave it 4 stars. It is by T. Kingfisher, which is the pen name of Ursula Vernon. Now, I need to tell you a bit about her, just in case. I've read a few books of hers. You would have heard me touch on her in other reading wrap-ups. Ursula Vernon is quite a well-known children's author. And in about, I think she says 2013, I want to say. She says it at the end of the book. She decided that she no longer just wanted to write children's books. She wanted to add blood, gore and death into some of her books and decided that wasn't really suitable for children's books. I don't know what children's book she was reading, because if she'd read this, she might have just written a children's book with blood, gore and death in it. Anyway, so this is her first foray into a more adult book. It's very short. Look how tiny that is. And she took on the name T. Kingfisher to kind of separate herself from her children's books. This was self-published originally. And as she said, it wasn't published that well. There were mistakes. There was this, that and the other. But it was self-published. And it did what it did. And it kind of, as she kept writing more and more books as T. Kingfisher, this one kind of just quietly stood to the side while still, you know, bringing in a little bit of revenue. But it has a soft spot in her heart for being the first book that she kind of did under T. Kingfisher. And then recently, I think it was Tor, decided to republish, reissue this book. And I'm so glad they did. First of all, she says she's glad they did because they went through the book, corrected everything that was wrong. And let me just read you the blurb. High, low fantasy, high mischief. No one knows exactly how the Goblin War began, but folks will tell you that goblins are stinking, slinking, filthy, sheep-stealing, henhouse raiding, obnoxious, rude and violent. And goblins would actually agree with all this and might throw in cowardly and lazy too, for no good reason. So we are following a sort of world where the humans and the elves have teamed up against the goblins. There's this goblin war going on. And we are following Sergeant Nasilica, who is part of the Niners, I believe, who are often called the Whining Niners. And they're in the middle of a battle. She has some very weird recruits. They're in the middle of a battle when she sees a wizard start to do a spell against the goblin side. And she's like, I need to take him down. And so she starts charging towards the wizard, and not realising that some members of her troop are following her. Something happens, and the nine goblins, including her, end up in a wood. And this wood is not only miles and miles and miles away from Goblin Home, but it's completely miles away from the battle and on the side of the enemy. They are behind enemy lines. They're in this wood. This wood's really weird. The goblins in this have my whole heart. They are adorable. I talked about Brigands and Bread Knives last month with the Chaos Goblin. Oh my gosh, if you love that book and you love the Chaos Goblin, you need to pick this up. There are twin goblins who are new recruits who don't know what they're doing. There is a goblin in here who is highly mechanical and makes amazing things, but no one will kind of get him to make, I don't know, weapons and things for the goblin army, because his things don't explode, and the goblins believe if things don't blow up, then how are they going to kill your enemy, even if they kill some of you? So He's intelligent, but in a mechanical, academic way. And there's a goblin in here who, due to an accident, now only talks through a teddy bear. And Nasilka is trying to keep these goblins safe and get back to where she needs to go. And things start happening. We are also at the point of view of a guy called Sings to Trees, who is an elf. And he's not like other elves. He doesn't get involved in all the war stuff. He doesn't live in a pretty house in a pretty castle. Sings to Trees has a tiny cabin that has gnawed furniture, nothing breakable, and is full of animals because he is a vet. And the other elves don't understand why he does this. When we actually meet him, he is helping a unicorn give birth. And they're not nice, pretty unicorns. He's very aware that this unicorn might bite him in a minute. Not only does he help animals and has recovering animals in his house, but he also helps the local trolls who absolutely love him. And he lives near a human village and he helps with their animals too. And he just likes being covered in dirt, being exhausted to the point he falls asleep in his rocking chair, and having table that has teeth marks in it and one clay cup that doesn't break. He's very happy with this. And because of things that are happening, the paths of these people meet. So Nasilka and her goblins and Sings to Trees, and we kind of go from there. There's something going on that is causing death, and I love this book. What I will say is what a lot of reviews said is, for some reason this book seems very cozy, and then there's one chapter in this that has so many dead people in it and a quite descriptive version, what's the word? Examples. And yeah, some quite disturbing things. And it's just really like, where did that come from? I was just enjoying this book and then, oh my goodness. And it gets very high stakes near the end as well. I was really like, oh my gosh, I hope everyone's okay. I love these. And even though I only gave it a 4, for 2 reasons. Well, the main reason. I want this to be either a series or a full-length novel or a TV series. This gave me Pratchett vibes, which is interesting because when I read the bit in the back, T. Kingfisher says that she was inspired by her love of Terry Pratchett and her love of the James Herriot All Creatures Great and Small series. Now, I have now, in the last few years, become an avid fan of Terry Pratchett's work. And I, since childhood, loved the James Herriot series books. I still have all my originals that are falling apart because not only have they been read a gazillion times, hyperbole, but there you go, they have travelled around the world with me. I love those books. So it is it's no surprise I love this one. But it got 4 stars, or 4 stars, because it's just not long enough. And I'm sorry, I want more. It's just that simple. We don't even find out the end. So we work out what the mystery is and they solve the mystery, but there's something we don't find out that I want to know. So that's why I got 4 stars. I've been thinking about this book since. I love it. It's a new favourite. Then was book 2 in the Lightfall graphic novel. You would have heard me talk about this in my January reading wrap up. This is book 2. This is Shadow and the Bird. Still can't tell you much about it, but we are still following Cad and Bee. They're still looking for her grandfather, her adoptive grandfather. There is a mystery. Something is happening to their world. Something has awoken and is destroying something that is vital to their world. And they are still on their journey to find both their grandfather and to find out how they can stop what is happening to their world. I gave this 3.75. I didn't quite enjoy it as much as the first book. I will show you some of the, I don't want to give any spoilers, but this is some of the artwork. Absolutely beautiful artwork. There are some absolutely laugh out loud moments in this book. Cad is so funny. It just cracks me up. He's more of a let's rush into danger and think about it later kind of person, whereas B suffers with anxiety, and there's very good anxiety representation in here. And there's a cat. What's not to love? I really enjoyed it. If you've picked up the first book, I enjoyed it. You're going to love this one. If you don't read graphic novels, you're not going to pick this up. But I love this world. I love these characters. And I love the way that B is starting to look at the situation differently to what might be expected, or it deals with preconceived notions in this book. But I will say, I wish I had the third one right now. And I can't read it until April. I don't have it, but I wish I had it right now because something happens at the end of this novel which changes everything, and I don't know how they're going to sort it out. Let's move on to the last 3 books, and this I'm going to put in the supernatural genre. So we have Human Rights by Juno Dawson. This is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy of Her Majesty's Royal Coven. There's like a mini book that is set during Anne Boleyn's time, but there was the 3 main in the trilogy. I was putting this book off for as long as possible because this has become one of my favourite series of all time. However, this book only got a 4.5. Again, I can't tell you much because I can't give you any spoilers from the previous books. This book literally finishes right on from the end of the last book, which finished right on from the first book. We are following a group of friends who have been friends since childhood. They are witches, and some of them are members of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we are following from the last book, we're more back-ish in England for part of the book, whereas the last book we were sort of travelling all around. And the big bad is finally here now. They are dealing with something awful that they found out right at the end of the last book, and there's the fallout from that. And the big bad they are battling is here. The full battle is on. This is the end battle. And we go from there. And I love these characters. I love the representation in this book. I love how it's dealt with. I love some of the very important conversations around representation that this book does in a way that I don't find preachy, just in a really good conversational way from both points of view. I love all that. I enjoy Juno Dawson's writing. And I am sad that this book's over. I'm hoping she brings out maybe a few little in-between books where we can touch on certain characters. There's characters in here that I would love them to have their own story. So I hope she does that because I love this series. The reason it got 4.5, 2 things. Firstly, this fell into the trap that a lot of my favourite kind of books or shows do. So I love the series Supernatural. And the first few seasons of that were outstanding. Then we started having the overarching big bad for each season, sometimes going over 2 seasons. Fine, that's what happens. It happened in Buffy. It happens in everything. I am not a fan of big bads, guys. I don't want an overarching storyline. I want a story every episode. That's what I want. I just want to be dealing with myths and creatures every episode. Not a big bad. I'm not that kind of person. But where Supernatural started to get a bit out of hand, as well as Buffy and things and shows like that, is the big bad becomes the biggest bad of all. I mean, in Supernatural, we meet... Gosh, I don't want to give spoilers. I'm going to. We meet God. And it's just like, right, okay. Where do we go from there? And I think that's the trap. I have not even finished Supernatural, the series, because I was just a bit like, okay, I'm fed up of things that are happening, tropes that are being used to just be too silly. And also, when your big bad is the biggest of the biggest or the good, like, where can you go from there? What are you going to take on? A planet? Like, it's too much. And this kind of fell into that, without giving spoilers. The big bad they're dealing with, it's too much. I would rather it wasn't that big a thing, is all I'm saying, because that to me is not something I enjoy reading about. But still 4.5. And the other thing that it did, again, trying not to give spoilers, but this might be a slight one. There's time travel trope used in this book. I do not like the time travel trope. It is not something I enjoy. I don't like the paradoxes it can create. I don't like the way that in some books, not this, but in some books, it's a lazy way to get around certain things that don't add up. Not in this. That's not how Juno Dawson uses it. But I still just found it too like, okay. Too many coincidences, too many things able to happen because now you've put time travel in. And also certain characters have to continue to do certain actions even though they now don't want to, because if they don't, they'll mess up the timeline. Yeah. So I got a 4.5. Yeah, those things annoyed me. However, loved the book and sad about the series being over. What do I do now? Okay, so next one I want to talk about is Dead Heat. This is book 4 in the Alpha and Omega series by Patricia Briggs, which is an offshoot of the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs, which is one of my favourite series of all time. There's only, I believe, 2 more books left in the Alpha and Omega series. There's apparently a new one supposedly coming out. I checked the Patricia Briggs website, but it has nothing. It has no cover, no title, no date, nothing. Like, come on, Patricia. I need another Mercy one, and I need another Alpha and Omega, because I'm close to finishing. She has got other series, but I love this world. Now, this got 5 stars. This is my favourite in the Alpha and Omega series so far. We are still following Charles and Anna, who are mated werewolves. Charles works, does a job for his father, the Maroc, who is the head of all werewolves in Northern Europe and North America, and he's often sent out to deal with issues, and that's what we've seen in the books. But this book did something that I've been asking from other books. So let me tell you a bit about it. Charles and Anna are traveling to Arizona. It's nearly Anna's birthday, and Charles wants to buy her a present. She doesn't know what it is yet, but when they get there, she finds out he's going to buy her a horse, in particular some kind of Arabian horse. Now, the ranch that he's going to purchase this horse from is actually owned by a werewolf and the werewolf's son, Joseph. Now, Charles is half Navajo. His father is Welsh and his mother was Navajo First Peoples. And Joseph is also Navajo. Now, Charles being a werewolf, he's been alive for a couple hundred years, but Joseph is human and the son of the werewolf Hostine, that Charles knows. And Joseph is now in his 80s and has called Charles and asked him to come to visit. And Charles has not seen Joseph since Joseph was in his 60s. He actually first met Joseph as a teenager at about 12. And then as Joseph grew older into his 20s and things, which Charles kind of looks like he's in his 20s or 30s, they became best friends and spent a lot of time together. And so this book deals with Charles coming to terms with grieving when you have a long lifespan, but you are watching people you love around you who do not, and they are getting older and passing away. And so Charles takes Anna to go to this ranch to get a horse, and he is also going to see Joseph. There are other complications within like the family, and when they are there, something happens to Joseph's son, Cage, is married to Chelsea, and something happens to Chelsea that endangers their children, so Joseph's grandchildren. And it all comes out that it's probably a fae that's involved. Now, these books do deal with dark themes, can get quite gruesome, which is not always my favourite thing. And I will say that this book in particular, we're dealing with the fae. And if you've ever read fairy stories and things like that, think about Rumpelstiltskin. The fae have a habit of taking children. So this whole book is about a fae who does that. So if that is a theme you do not want to read about, don't pick this book up. I usually would not read about a theme like that, but it's the Alpha and Omega series, so I need to finish the series. So Charles then gets roped in or wants to help because, you know, these children are human, but they are the great-grandchildren of that pack, and therefore they get the protection of the whole of the werewolf packs. And also it's his friend's grandchildren. And we follow as Charles and Anna are trying to track down this fae, and also a child has been taken. Not one of the grandchildren, a different child has been taken, and they are trying to find that child and deal with the fae. But what is really interesting about this book is about a third of this book is just about horses. Now, Patricia Briggs loves horses. She has Arabians and she's had them for 20 odd years or so. And in this book, she lets all that love, all that nerdy horse geekiness that she has into this book. And I've read different reviews. Some hate that, some love it. Turns out I loved it. Now, I like a horse. I've read horses. They're very beautiful creatures, but I'm not a horse nerd. I don't really know much about horses. I haven't ridden a horse in maybe 20 years, 30 years. But I loved learning all this. I loved learning about the different types of Arabian horses, the different types of saddles. We don't only get to meet them because Charles is looking at horses for Anna and they have to try them out. And we get to know all these different breeds and things I have no clue about, and Western saddle riding and English and all this kind of thing. But there's also a horse show in here, and we get to participate or read the participation in this horse show. And that's about a third of the book. And turns out I absolutely loved it. Who knew? And then I was Googling, oh, they mentioned this horse. Let me look this horse up. Or they mentioned this. I love it when a book does that. When a book interests me so much for a subject I know nothing about, I immediately finish the book and go, let me find this out. And so we're dealing with that. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with friendship. We're dealing with prejudices, not just against the people of colour in this book and First Peoples, but also that if you've been a werewolf for 200 years and your culture said one thing about a certain thing, you may still hold that preconception all these years later, which is something that there is between a particular member and another person. I don't want to give spoilers. And we deal with that kind of thing. We deal with trauma and, like I said, grief and all these kind of things that are really deep. And the reason I love this book and why it's my favourite is it gave me the thing I've been asking for of the other Anna and Charles books. Normally, the Alpha and Omega books, Anna and Charles go somewhere and they deal with a situation and then they go home. In this book, they do go somewhere, but we are in a place where Charles knows these people. And I keep saying, I want characters to reappear. I want those connections because that's what I love about the Mercy Thompson series. So not only do we get that connection because we get the friendships, we get to know more about Charles, we get to know more about a life that he led way, way, way before he ever met Anna. But we also get a reoccurring character that we saw, I think it was the last book. She comes back in because she's helping them with the case. And I love her. I loved her in that book and I love her in this one. So we're starting to get people that we know. And I really hope that continues because that's what I miss. Mercy Thompson has this wide range of characters that are either friends or enemies, but they reappear throughout the books. And so you get to know them. You get to know that world. Whereas with Charles and Anna, we don't get to do that often. So I love this book. I love Charles and Anna's relationship. It turns out this is 3 years on from when they first met. Anna's still dealing with some of the effects of the trauma she went through before she ever met Charles. We're dealing with Charles's grief and his connection to his Navajo ancestry. We're talking about all these. It's just, I love this book. It got 5 stars, guys. Final book of the month, another supernatural. Now, this I read on Kindle, and then I immediately went out and bought the book. And I also bought the second book in the series. So that should say everything about how much I enjoyed this book. I only gave it 4 stars. There are reasons, but I only gave it 4 stars. But I love this book. I also love this cover. So this is Bless Your Heart by Lindy Ryan. Gave it 4 stars. And this is, the best way I can describe it is Steel Magnolias meets Buffy. So this is classed as a horror. If you've read Grady Hendrix, I know some of you might have picked Grady Hendrix up on my recommendation. This is Grady Hendrix kind of style. I don't normally read horror, but I can read Grady Hendrix horror, even though some of it really, like, there are scenes in those books that have never left my brain to this day. And there's a scene in here that's the same. But there's a way Grady Hendrix writes horror that makes it accessible for me and has kind of like a sense of humour. I really like it. And that's the same for Lindy Ryan. Now, this is set in the 1990s, late 1990s, so about 1999, in a small Texas town right in the heart of the Bible Belt. We are introduced to the Evans women who run a funeral parlour. There are 4 generations. There's the great-grandmother, the grandmother, the mother and the daughter, Luna. Luna is about to turn 16 and she does not know that her family business is not necessarily what she thinks it is, but her family business and the family business of all the Evans women is to put down the restless dead. So they run a funeral parlour and they have all these kind of superstitions that they do to make sure that, because anyone can become a restless dead. It's not about being bitten by a vampire. It's more about how you die, whether you were ready to die, whether your death was painful, all that kind of thing. So they run this funeral parlour and they have a strict set of rules. And at least once a month, they have to put down a restless dead. And it's quite simple. They normally do it, not a problem. However, sometimes the dead become restless because a Master Strigoi is in town. Now, what I love about Lindy Ryan is she has taken the idea of supernatural creatures like vampires and zombies, and she has created kind of a new mythology, which is something you don't often see. So they are not vampires, they are not zombies, they are a mix in between. They are called the Strigoi. They start off as kind of ghouls. They do feed, but they tend to feed on the soul, but they're very messy as they're doing it. Let's put it that way. There is a lot of gore in this book, guys. Particularly a couple of scenes. There is a lot of gore, but they're kind of eating the spirit, the soul. And as they do that with each one they take, they become more and more powerful until they basically look human again. And when I mean human, I mean human. They can eat, they can walk in the daylight, garlic, silver, none of that bothers them, crosses, none of that. Not even as a ghoul, none of that's a thing. Doesn't bother them, not like the others. So this is a new kind of type of vampire zombie ghoul, and I loved it. I'm here for that. I love a new take on a classic monster. And something is happening where the dead are rising quite dramatically. Not the dead, not out of the graves, but people who are dying are coming back to life. And there are two types in this world. There are the knockers and there are the callers. The knockers will come a knocking on your door or in your car, and if you answer, you know, and the callers will call your name. So they're normally people who know you. And so we're dealing with this new kind of mythology. Love that. We're also dealing with the 1990s. So there's all those vibes. I was a teenager in the 1990s. So it really did give me that vibes. It has tongue in cheek. It mentions Buffy in here, which, you know, it is very like Buffy. The chosen family. The Evans women are looked at in town as being a bit strange. Their husbands tend to die young, or, you know, things happen. They always keep their own name. They run the funeral parlour. It's the only one in town, so people can't avoid them even if they want to. They're just seen as odd, and people prefer not to be around them. But they do a very important job. And so we go from there where all of a sudden, the restless dead are becoming extremely restless. People are dying. There was one character who died quite early on. I was like, no, because we get to meet her. And she seems really sweet. And by this point, we've found out some of the history, because basically the Evans ladies have to sit Luna down and go, well, let us show you this person who's undead. And now let us show you what we do. And let us tell you what our business is. And Luna's like, what? And so we already know. And then someone comes a knocking on this person's door. And I was like, don't open the door. Move away from it. No, don't do it. And this was such a sweet person. I was like, no. This was at midnight. I devoured this book in 2 days. I kept saying to my partner, I'm reading it a lot at night. And I shouldn't be, because I kept having to turn the light on. He was like, why are you reading it at night? I was like, I can't put it down. I just cannot put this book down. I am so loving it. I'm invested. I love the 90s rep. Not everyone has a mobile phone. Computers are still not a thing in every house. You know, I love all that. We're dealing with preconceived notions again, because we're in the Bible Belt, but there's things going on. There are judgments. There are diverse characters in here that, like there's a young gay person in this town, and we are dealing with what that is like for a gay person in the 90s in this area. So there's lots of that sort of discussion as well, which I found interesting and important. Although I also wondered, are they just tokens put in there because they're the only two? And I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. And I just enjoyed it. Luna annoyed me, which she's meant to because she's a teenager. She wasn't doing what she was told. She wasn't treating her mum properly. And her grandparents kept going, don't go out dark. And what's she doing? Even though she knows there's dangers out there, she's like, oh, I'm just going to do this and hang out with this person. And It's like, listen to your family, lady. And I worked out who one of the main bads was. There's lots of secrets that get uncovered because there's things Luna does not know, not just about her family business, but about her actual family. And that has to be dealt with. I just really enjoyed this book, guys. It was a fun, gory, creepy at points ride. And yes, I had to have the lights on even as a grown adult because I don't like horror or creepy stuff. And yet I love this. I love the 90s feel. I can't wait for the second book. Although something happens, there's a big battle at the end of this book. Big fight between the side of good and the side of bad. And yeah, it's making me feel a way that I can't say because I can't get spoilers going into the next book. And I would say, do not read up about the next book, because I did that before you finish this one, because the next book gives you massive spoilers for what happens at the end of this one. So don't do that. Now, why did I only give it 4 stars? Firstly, there was a character in here, the great grandmother, who I loved, by the way. Oh my gosh, she is, I believe the word is ornery. I don't know. But she is a interesting lady. But she sucks on butterscotches. Now, that's fine. That's a character thing. Cool. Understood it. I think on one page there was 5 references. She was sucking on the butterscotch. She put her hand in for the butterscotch. She had to put another butterscotch in her mouth. Oh, she'd run out of butterscotch. She had to go to a drawer for a butterscotch. We get it? And I just felt like it was taking me out of the story because I was getting so annoyed. I get it. She eats them non-stop. She constantly has one in her mouth. Okay, get it. Please, you don't have to keep repeating it. And it was repeated. It was as if it was the only character element to her. Like, this is her whole personification. She reads this kind of book and she sucks on butterscotches. No, we did not need that. So that's why I gave it that. I also didn't feel that emotionally invested to the main characters. And considering what happens, to feel more invested in a side character that we barely meet for a chapter than the main characters with what happens, it didn't have an emotional response to me, which should do if it was going to get a 5. So I took a whole 0.5 points off, knocked it down to a 4 from 4.5 just for the butterscotches because that annoyed me. But I can't wait. I can't read the next book. It's sitting looking me on my TBR trolley and I can't pick it up until April because I'm reading for the Irish Readathon in March and I won't have space. But if I do get space, that's the book I'm picking up. And then, I don't know, I think there's supposed to be a third one out, but I do know Lindy Ryan has a new one out, which is like a Barbie retelling. Let me get the name of it. So it's not Barbie retelling, but it's called Dollface. And it is basically another kind of slasher horror that people are saying it's like Barbie meets Scream. That is out soon. It's not out at the moment. It comes out this year in about May, I think. But yeah, so I am definitely going to be picking up Dollface as well. I'm hoping she's continuing this series because I want to see more classic monsters with a new twist. And also I want to be with the Evans women in this small town in the 90s in the stifling heat. I want that. So fingers crossed this becomes a long-term series. I heard about this on one of my favourite booktubers. And I don't often have the same kind of taste as them, but this sounded right up my street. So I'm super glad that I picked it up. So that is 17 books, guys. I have had some big wins. I have had some, yeah, okay. Didn't have any that I absolutely didn't like, you know, disliked completely. I had lots of fun with rereads. I had some 5 stars, both from old rereads and new, the Alpha and Omega. I have a series I'm going to be not continuing with. I have a series that I will be continuing with, which is The Deep Woods. I've tried some new things. We have everything from romance, historical fiction, cozy murder mystery, a little bit of horror, graphic novels, science fiction, classic, mystery. We have everything, a little bit of so much in this one. It was another brilliant reading month. I really prioritized reading this month. In the last few months, I felt in a bit of a reading slump and other things have taken my time. I usually have dedicated time in my day where I read, and I always carry a book with me, no matter where I am. If I'm just waiting in the car for 5 minutes, I'm picking up my book. But I stopped having my dedicated reading time so much over the last few months. And so this month, I really prioritized that, which, you know, and lots of my books were short. I mean, this isn't even that long. It's a very quick read. This is a quick read. So lots of books were short. I also did some, we touched on some cultural reading this month. I loved being in ancient Mesopotamia. I loved being in Georgian London. I loved finding out about some mythology from around the world. Have a Japanese author. So do you know what? It was just an interesting month for me. I enjoyed the majority of my reads. Even those that only got a 3, I still enjoyed them. There was none that I absolutely was like, no, dislike. The short Amish candy shop one was a close, but still. So that's it, guys. Whoa, what a reading wrap up. Told you it was going to be a long one. I hope you got some recommendations here. If you have, as always, let me know down below. I'm always interested to see which books call to certain people. The ones that I cannot stop thinking about, other than the historical ones, are Nine Goblins and Bless Your Heart. They're the ones that are really stuck in my head. But the Ignatius Sancho one and the Semiramis Queen, fascinating. And I went on quite a journey learning more about them. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. What was a favourite? What are you going to pick up? And let me know what a favourite is that you have read this month. Always like hearing that too. And what should we have? Should we have something? Should we have something for the goblins? How about a teddy bear? If you've made it to the end of this video, firstly, thank you so much for sticking with me. It's a long one, but I know those of you who enjoy these videos enjoy them, even though they're super long. So I appreciate every single one of you that watches them, especially if you watch it all the way to the end. I appreciate you with my whole heart, so thank you so much. But leave me a teddy bear emoji for the goblins, because I just love this book. Even though it got a 4, I love this. I love these goblins. I love them, love them, love them. This is going to be a reread for me. I think it could be one of my favourite tea kingfishers. Not quite as much as I loved Nettle and Bone. It's my favourite tea kingfisher to date, but this is a close second. And anyway, guys, I'll be back again with another video, and I'll be back in March with, well, the start of April with my March reading wrap up, which, spoiler, will all be Irish authors or Irish stories for the Irish Readathon. Might sneak a few other things in there, but, you know, mainly Irish. And until next time, wherever you are in the world, I hope you are having lots and lots of bookish fun. Bye for now.